Okay, so what we're looking at here is VPLS again. Now, on the right hand side, I have VPLS running with BGP with multi-homing. And on the left hand side, we have VPLS running with LDP, also with multi-homing. Now, we've done this a couple of times now. The last two times we looked at the BGP, firstly, we just looked at multi-homing, and secondly, we looked at multi-homing with normalization. We normalized VLAN 600 to VLAN 601 as we were doing the VPLS. So we're familiar with the commands there. And on the left-hand side, we've got the LDP and we've got the multi-homing from R7 and R8. So there's a couple of differences. There's differences in the output of the show commands. Then there's differences in the way the commands are configured. And finally, there is quite a large functional difference in the way the multi-homing is actually implemented. So let's run through it. So the first thing that we immediately notice is that on the LDP, which we're effectively seeing for the first time, we now are using a routing instance. Up till now, LDP has been really just neighbor-based. But with VPLS, we're using a routing instance, and to a certain extent it makes sense. If we didn't have it, where would we configure our protocols VPLS? Up till now, routing instances have just been sort of on the BGP side, and that's because that's part of the whole BGP Layer 3 VPN structure. Okay, so that's the first difference. And then we have a VPLS ID, we have an encapsulation type. Okay then. So what about the backup and the multi-homing? Well, this is where we really do see some differences. If you remember with the BGP, we would, on the peer connected to the customer, we would say which one was primary and which one was backup. So this is what we would be configuring on router 3, the word primary, and if we were on router 4, the word backup. If we then did show VPLS connections on, say, router 2, we would see up and RN. And if we then did show route advertising protocol and put in the loop back of the route reflector, and we had a look, we would discover that router 3 was offering a site preference of 65.535, and router 4 was offering a site preference of 1. So in this case, 3 and 4 have been configured as primary or backup, and they're advertising it, which is a really stable way to do it. Let's go back to the LDP. The LDP is really very different. On the LDP, router 8 is going to be our backup, and this is a real functional change. Router 8, in a sense, doesn't know because router 6, router 7, and router 1 choose to treat router 8 as a backup. So this is functionally very different. If we look at the commands here that would be configured, say on router 1 and router 6, we say we put in the main neighbor, which in this case is 7, that's 7, then we put in the backup neighbor, 8. We do the same thing on router 1. So what impact does this have? Well, router 8 is going to be sending labels because his neighbours are good. However, the other peers see router 8 as not a neighbour they're going to send labels to, it's a backup neighbour. And so if we were to run show VPLS connections, we see up and backup, and it's really a functionally different way to do it. So what we have here is we have BGP VPLS on the right with multi-homing. We have LDP VPLS on the left. We have the commands that are different between the two highlighted on the board and the show commands.